Well, good morning. Welcome back to the broadcast Retirement Network. I'm Jeff Snyder. This is BRN Sunday for Sunday, December 12th, 2021. We've got another great show for you this week. We've got members of the media, academia, and financial services standing by to analyze all the news in retirement markets, technology, personal finance, so much more. So sit back, relax, enjoy this episode of BRN Sunday. Welcome back. Now we're going to shift gears, talk tech, consumer products, and a lot more. Joining us on the line, he's the managing editor for The Street. That's The Street. We're talking about Daniel Klein. Dan, great to talk to you. Thanks so much for joining us this morning.
Good morning, Jeff. Thank you for having me.
Okay, Dan. We're going to talk about two, divergent issues. But the first issue, Amazon, which has a huge cloud business that I know you're going to go into in a minute, had a major outage this week.
Jeff, you don't realize how much Amazon Web Services actually powers. And I'll give you some examples. Obviously, like your Alexa didn't work, your Ring doorbell didn't work. You couldn't get into Disney World. They couldn't take admissions. So this is one of those problems that you don't think about until it happens. And it's a little bit scary because, look, a lot of places don't have redundancies. I remember, about a decade ago, longer than that actually, I was running a large toy store and we had this huge contingent there was a model train convention in town and 3 busloads of people were coming to our store with a huge section of model trains. I was going to sell all the inventory I was sitting on, and somebody drove into a transformer at the end of our street and we lost power and couldn't take credit cards. Fortunately, I sent someone to CVS, bought 1 million flashlights, and we used the old ka-chunk credit card machines where you took the impression, which no one would let you do anymore. But when AWS goes down, there's no manual way to do it. There's no easy solution here. So this does bring a big question of perhaps not national security, but can our nation run if this actually became a prolonged outage? And that's absolutely an issue.
Why? I mean, without going into the technical, I'm not asking you to say that the Ethernet cable was unplugged. I guess, do we know why this occurred? And there are a lot of small businesses and large businesses that use AWS.
Amazon playing it pretty tight-lipped on this one. It's probably not strategically to their advantage to tell us exactly why it happened. There have been a lot of reassurances that they have it in hand, but I question a system that's supposed to be in the cloud, that's supposed to, if the cloud service in one part of the mysterious nowhere goes down, it's supposed to be picked up by another. So I do hope this causes Amazon to ask an awful lot of questions.
Yeah, and from a business continuity perspective, do you have to plan to not be just reliant? Do you have to have a backup cloud server to go to, something so that you can basically throw a switch to move to the backup?
There really is no backup. And the question is, do big enterprises start having redundancies between Amazon and Microsoft or some of the other major cloud providers? That could be very expensive. That defeats the purpose to be in the cloud. But look, this isn't the 90s where we had, I worked at an online game show company and we had a big room full of servers in New York, and when we got successful, we built a room full of servers somewhere on the West Coast. I don't think we're going to see companies spend that kind of money. That's tens of millions, maybe even more in larger cases. So, I'm not sure what the solution is here. Perhaps you want to see some sort of interoperability agreements between, Microsoft and Amazon and IBM and other places that have clouds. But it's not like if AWS goes down, all of a sudden, like Microsoft Azure can take on that volume. So unless companies are actually building their own redundancies, I don't see an easy solution for this one.
Yeah. It kind of caught me off guard. I would think that this was going to happen rarely. This is not going to happen regularly. So I guess we're going to have to see how this one plays out. Follow this story. Dan, let's switch gears. This one caught my interest for a lot of reasons, and I want to discuss this. The Better.com CEO fired 900 employees via Zoom, and I guess when I first heard this story, the callousness by which this occurred. It was like a 3 minute, someone leaked it on the internet, so you can go out to your favorite news site and probably find it. But what was your rapid reaction to this?
Yeah, it's tone deaf. Like, first of all, if you're going to have a mass firing, you don't do it in a way where the optics are bad. And I understand you probably, in a company with, 3 or 4 thousand employees, you probably have like 4 or 5 HR people. So it's not ideal to have 800 individual meetings. You know what you have to do? Have 800 individual meetings. Literally, his phrasing was, hey, if you're unlucky enough to be on this call, you're laid off. Like, that is someone who doesn't understand humanity. Normally, when you get laid off, it's presented as softly as possible, and they give you, the exit with all the benefits and how long you're still going to be paid. This was basically done like it was an episode of Punk'd, like, oh, like you're on this call, like, ha ha, you're fired. It was absolute textbook in what not to do.
Yeah, I guess from the CEO perspective, look, anybody, if you're on the other end on Zoom, they can record you with your phone, right? They can record this. I think, I think there's a lot of different lessons here. One is someone can always record you either through Zoom or if not through Zoom, through another tool to do that. So be wary of what you say and always think about the optics. I think a longer Dan, if I'm an investor in this company, and apparently this is like valued at billions of dollars, if I'm not mistaken, um, what kind of signal does that send? Maybe you like it if you're an investor. Okay, then I'm just gonna cut all these people because we're just not successful.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, but that's not like this is a company that does mortgages. Like they deal with the public. So look, Microsoft and all your big tech companies regularly have layoffs, and they are very callous. But they're also handled sort of behind the scenes. When your whole business is public trust, ooh, like to just show that you don't care. You want your mortgage company to care. Like I think that's really important.
Yeah, is it really better.com? Or is
No,
it is it
uh,
is it I don't think it's really better.com. I would really think about renaming the show or the show. Don't rename the show. The show was the show. Rename the company now.
yeah, look, here's the problem also. Better.com is based on Ether. Like, are they really better? Like, we've all seen the like Rocket Mortgages, which is another company that pushes that it's redoing how mortgages are. And really, what does it do? In certain cases, it can ingest some documents, so you have to do less manual work. Better.com is not truly disrupting the mortgage business. And I think
Mhm.
at some point, maybe advertising something that you aren't isn't going to resonate all that well with consumers.
Yeah, I also want to point out that there have been blog posts. I guess the CEO had posted some blog posts about the employees to, you'll have to tell me what the site is, Dan, but it's like Blind, I think it's called, is a site that where you can post things about companies. I think it's called like Blind, but you'll correct me if I'm wrong. And he apparently had written things about these employees under a pseudonym. So he was, so he already has kind of this track record of, to me, that's very cutthroat. Okay, if you're dissatisfied with an employee, you should let them know and have a conversation about it, and then ultimately let them go. And if you need to have 900 meetings, you have 900 meetings. You don't do it in a blanket interview. But again, I've never managed a company with thousands of employees before.
Yeah, no, it's absolutely a problem. But when you have these hard charging entrepreneurial CEOs, maybe they're not going to have all the polish and all the bells and whistles. And I know this guy is taking the hit here, and it's terrible. And they callously let go of a lot of people. But if you're going to want visionaries, well, sometimes you're going to get unpolished. You're going to get Elon Musk. And look, do I wish every, super genius visionary who starts these companies has like, an older guy next to him with a lot of like polish and experience kind of reining him in? Yeah, I do think that's kind of necessary. You need your Yoda to tell you like, hey, wait a minute, Luke, you might not be trained yet. But I don't think that's what's happening here. And you can't get all smarts and then not have some of this brashness sometimes.
Yeah, I just think that it's just no longer acceptable to be, like I've been listening to this audiobook numerous times about Steve Jobs, right? Visionary leader, really moved a lot of different industries forward. But the behavior behind the scenes, treating people certain ways, I just don't think that has any place in corporate or anywhere. I mean, that's just not how you treat people, and you're not going to be that kind of stuff gets out. We didn't have the internet back then, Dan. We didn't have the internet in 1982, but we do now, and that kind of stuff gets out. And I think that you go a long way to treating. If that's how you're going to treat employees, how are you going to treat your customers? So,
Yeah, and look, a lot of companies are actually good at focusing on customers and bad at focusing on employees, and it gets hidden a little bit.
mhm.
There are definitely places you like doing business. Look, up until recently, a lot of your favorite quick serve restaurants paid employees really badly and didn't think about their well-being. And that includes some places that don't really have that reputation. I think we are at a transitory point in the US due to labor shortages, due to pressures that are forcing companies to think about being better citizens.
Yeah. Well, Dan, we're going to have to watch this one. And, I'm not trying to be holier than thou. I have my bad days, and anyone will tell you that. We all have our bad days, so I'm not perfect. Just think that it's something we should bring to attention. I think there's some lessons for all of us, whether you're an employee, employer, a customer, things to learn. Dan Klein, always great to talk to you. Enjoy the rest of your weekend, and we'll talk to you again next week, my friend.
Jeff, we'll see you then. Thank you.
Bye. Welcome back. Now we're going to close things out on the program with a look at real estate. Joining us on the line, fresh off a big webinar today with Barron's. We're talking about Market Watch's real estate reporter, intrepid real estate reporter, Jacob Passy. Jacob, great to talk to you. Thanks so much for joining us again on the program this morning.
Yeah, glad to be here.
Okay, so I know you probably asked dozens and dozens and dozens and dozens of questions about real estate, but you wrote a great piece this week that I want to ask you about, and that is high housing costs may be one reason behind the great resignation. We've all heard about this great resignation. Looks like high housing costs could be a big part of that.
Yeah, so I want to start off by saying that there is a little bit of an extent to which the jury is out on what really is the Great Resignation. We're not seeing people leaving, retiring in droves. What it really is people switching jobs, and it's happening particularly among younger workers. And one factor, and this story was based on a survey from Coldwell Banker, and one factor that people were citing as a driving force in their decision to switch jobs was because they could move to somewhere with a lower cost of living. So that doesn't just mean home prices, but that is obviously, or rent. That's obviously a huge part of it, as we saw from CPI this week and every month. In terms of a household's budget, the probably largest single expense for most people will be housing. But in this day and age where people can work remotely or are looking at high housing costs and are thinking, you know what, I want to relocate. Well, we're seeing people start to do that, and they are taking advantage of this trend of people switching jobs and doing it to save money and move to somewhere with a lower cost of living.
I mean, I think that just makes sense to me. If you're going to be working remotely and you no longer want to live in a big city where rents are going up, housing prices are going up. As you know, I live in Charlotte. The price of a home gone up significantly here. But if you're no longer commuting, maybe you moved here because you're working for Bank of America, Wells Fargo, you're working in the city. If you're no longer doing that, why would you continue to be there if it's no longer suiting your style of living?
Exactly. So you see, and again, this does vary across generations. You see younger folks, millennials, being much more inclined toward moving for those exact reasons. And that also makes sense because if you're younger, you're probably still in the early stages of your career. And so, if you're older and are well established in a company or something, you might be a little bit more hesitant to move jobs, especially because, if you have job security and you're, in your late 50s, approaching retirement, you don't want to jeopardize that necessarily just to move somewhere cheaper. But if you're just starting out or, only on your first or second job, you have a little bit more wiggle room there. And yeah, those people are looking at some of these markets across the country where cost of living is more affordable and also where jobs are headed. And that was also, I thought, an interesting part of this report was it wasn't just looking at this trend generally, but it was also, then following up and asking these people, so if you're thinking of moving, switching jobs and moving because of high housing costs, so where are you going? And they did ask that question.
Jacob, do you really think there is job security? I just heard the story. I mean, this is more anecdotal, just a general question, but I mean, for anybody, because I just heard where the CEO of Better.com, we were talking about earlier in the show, fired 900 people over Zoom. Is there really job security, and aren't mature people as vulnerable as anyone to losing their job, especially for someone who maybe is earning a third or two-thirds of what they're earning?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I think that the working environment today is definitely very different from our parents' and grandparents' generations, where you would stay, with a company your whole life and things like that. But I do think that the labor market is still very tight, and I think a lot of companies are still struggling to hire in the first place.
Mm-hmm.
So to the extent that your company is struggling to hire new workers, you're certainly going to think twice before letting your current workers go. And so I do think that that is true. And it's interesting you bring up the Better.com situation, because I am actually working on a story, not yet out, don't know exactly when it will come out, about that. But and I think that there is an important thing to note with that, if listeners are curious about housing and real estate, and see that as is this a sign of what's to come? Because the CEO got in some hot water for some comments he made in light of that
Mm-hmm.
large round of layoffs, where he accused the workers he laid off, of being lazy, I think he said, and claimed that they were only working a couple hours a day because they were remote, and things like that. In case someone is working a remote job and is worried, like, oh, are we going to see more companies doing that? There is something to be said that this might be a reflection of some, shuffling around in the mortgage industry. The environment right now in the mortgage industry is very different from where it was a year ago, even a few months ago. Since interest rates have risen, that has significantly cut down on the number of refinance loans that are happening. And so for certain mortgage lenders, their bread and butter is refinancing. And that's especially true for these larger digital national lenders like Better, Rocket Mortgage is another one. Although I don't want to just laid off people, but the environment has changed very significantly in just a few months' time, and so these companies that for the better part of 2 years have relied on a large number of refinances suddenly aren't seeing that business activity, and so you have to do some shuffling around when that happens. So some companies, that means maybe if you're a bank like Bank of America or something like that, you might take workers from your mortgage division, move them into another division where there might be more demand. But if you're just a mortgage lender, that might sometimes mean laying off workers. So don't want folks who are worried about their remote jobs seeing this Better.com news to think it's a sign of what's to come for other remote workers.
Yeah, I kind of took it, Jacob, more a reflection of the CEO and less a reflection on what you were describing. Yeah. I mean, by all accounts, I don't know, ruthless maybe is the right. I don't want to sit in judgment of anyone. It just, from what I've read, very, very 0-1 type of thinking. I'm not sure that really applies. Jacob, just to kind of close things out, housing prices continue to be high. What about renting? Or what about job assistance as or housing assistance as a benefit? For example, you want to attract someone to come to Des Moines, Iowa, or some part of the United States, maybe that is where they're looking for more workers, maybe providing that as a benefit to help you get affordable housing, to help with the transition if you're moving from the East or West Coast or from another place. Are you seeing more incentives in that regard in terms of attracting workers versus the housing costs?
Yeah, well, even before the pandemic, we were seeing some cities and states even across the country kind of toy with that idea. Tulsa, Oklahoma had created like a grant program where they were trying to attract remote workers. So if you were a remote worker and relocated to Tulsa, I forget exactly what the amount was, but they basically would pay you to move there. Vermont, I think, also experimented with something similar. I mean, Alaska is famous for the fact that they give grants to people to move to Alaska. That was even like a plot point in the Simpsons movie a number of years ago. But I had not heard too much of people paying to relocate workers or, offsetting housing costs. I think it would be more likely. But we all are seeing other incentives, that are coming out of the woodwork in terms of flexible working, obviously with remote working, or, a number of companies, especially companies that, need to hire, minimum wage workers or, retail workers, food service, you see them devoting funds towards education. So I think Walmart, Disney, with their theme parks, they have, created programs that they will pay for college degrees for their workers who are working on an hourly basis. And so, you raise an interesting point, and I would be curious to see if we do start seeing more either companies or, towns and cities starting to roll out those sorts of incentive type programs to attract workers, especially if we're seeing, folks want to relocate to more affordable parts of the country and keep their jobs. It would be I would be curious to see if that trend, you may be onto something, is what I'm getting at.
Yeah, that in so many words. Well, Jacob, it's always a pleasure chatting with you. Thanks so much for stopping by. I know you have a real busy schedule, and want to wish you a great rest of your weekend. Take care, my friend.
Talk soon. Take care.
Bye-bye. And that wraps up this episode of BRN Sunday. Have a topic of interest, someone you think we should talk to, drop us a line. And don't forget, for all the information in retirement markets, technology, personal finance, so much more, check out today's edition of our daily newsletter, The Morning Pulse. Want to search our archives or see the latest content? Check out our streaming partners, Roku, Amazon, and over 100 more. We're back again tomorrow, this time for BRN AM. We'll have a very special guest. So until then, I'm Jeff Snyder. Stay safe, keep on saving, and don't forget, roll with the changes.